She thought she was just returning a child's lost teddy bear on a rainy street corner. But what Nina didn't know was that one simple act of kindness would unlock the doors to a dream job, stir off his whispers, and lead her straight into the lives of a quiet CEO and his sweet little boy. A bear with one button eye would change everything, and by the time she realized the truth, she wasn't just part of their story, she was the heart of it. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's jump into the story. The morning rush in the city never slowed. Feet shuffled, horns blared, and the scent of coffee and concrete filled the air. Nina adjusted her coat and clutched her resume folder tightly. Today was important, when she had an interview, one she had waited months for. Nerves danced in her stomach as she stepped off the subway near 5th Street Station. She moved carefully through the crowd. People hurried past her, eyes on phones, minds elsewhere. Then something caught her eye, a small stuffed bear with one button eye rolled across the pavement, heading straight for the gutter, without thinking. Nina bent down, grabbing it just before it hit the curb. She stood up and scanned the street. A man about 10 feet ahead was pushing a stroller. The child inside, no more than 3 years old, was fussing and reaching toward the ground. "Excuse me," Nina called, weaving through the crowd. "This fell from your stroller." The man turned quickly. His eyes, tired but kind, landed on the bear in her hand. The little boy's face lit up. "Teddy!" the boy cried, arms reaching out. Nina handed the bear to the man, who then placed it gently in the child's lap. The boy hugged it tightly, as if he'd been reunited with something irreplaceable. "Thank you," the man said, his voice rough from exhaustion but warm with gratitude. "That bear is everything to him." Nina smiled, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I had one just like it growing up." The man nodded. His clothes were wrinkled, his shoes worn, but he stood tall. There was something heavy in his posture, like he was carrying more than just the weight of the stroller. "Not many people would have stopped," he added. "Some things are too small to notice," she replied, "but they still matter." The man gave a soft smile. "They matter most." Before Nina could say anything more, the crosswalk light blinked. The man glanced up. "This is us," he said, lifting the front of the stroller slightly to roll over the curb. "Have a good day," Nina called. "You too," he answered. Already blending into the crowd, Nina stood still for a second, the image of the boy hugging the bear lingering in her mind. Then she glanced at the time and her stomach twisted again. Her interview was in 20 minutes. She hurried up the steps of a tall, modern building. Greenlight Creative was written in sleek letters across the front. Inside, everything gleamed. Glass walls, soft lights, people walking with purpose. Nina checked in at the front desk and waited. She tapped her fingers against her folder, repeating facts in her mind. Her degree, her portfolio, her volunteer work. Breathe, smile, answer clearly. When she was called in, the room was colder than she expected. 3 people sat behind a long table, all in gray suits. They nodded politely as she entered. The questions came quickly, technical, sharp. Some she answered well. Others, she stumbled. One panelist frowned when she mentioned she hadn't worked at a major firm before. Nina tried to stay calm. She explained her freelance work, her storytelling skills, her passion for meaningful campaigns. But their expressions stayed unreadable. Afterward, she thanked them and left the room, her hands cold and her heart heavy. Outside, she sat on a bench across the street. The folder felt heavier now. She watched people walk past in shiny shoes. In perfect blazers, they looked like they belonged. She didn't. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, but it didn't comfort her. She stood up slowly and took the subway home. Her apartment was small, with peeling paint and a heater that clicked loudly when it tried to work. She placed her folder on the kitchen table and sank onto the couch. An hour passed. Then her phone buzzed. She picked it up lazily, expecting a spam message or a weather alert. One new email. Subject: mentorship opportunity. Greenlight Creative. Her eyes widened. She opened it quickly. "Dear Nina, It read, "I saw something in your interview that was more than what was written on your resume. You carry something real. I believe in second chances. Would you consider joining us as a junior intern under a mentorship program? Let me know." The message ended simply, "Your mentor." There was no name. Nina read it again, hardly breathing. Someone had seen something in her. Someone had looked beyond the hesitation, the nerves, the lack of polish. She stood and walked over to her small desk. An old sketchbook sat on the corner. She hadn't opened it in years. She flipped through the pages until she found one filled with childhood doodles. In the bottom corner was a bear with one button eye, just like the one from the stroller. She sat down and stared at the email again. She felt something new. Not confidence exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. Nina clicked reply. "Yes," she wrote. "Thank you for seeing me." And as she hit send, she thought of the tired man with the kind eyes, the boy with the bear. The weight in her chest felt a little lighter. Something told her this was not the last time she'd see them. Nina stood at the entrance of Greenlight Creative on her first official day as a junior intern. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her ID badge and stepped inside. Everything around her felt big and polished. The walls were glass. The air smelled like roasted coffee and new paper. People moved fast, speaking in hushed tones, holding tablets and coffee cups with ease. The receptionist smiled. "Take the elevator to the 6th floor. Creative strategy." Nina nodded and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and for a moment all was quiet. She took a deep breath and reminded herself she belonged here. Someone had seen something in her. Someone believed she had more to offer than a resume. The creative strategy floor buzzed with activity. Voices overlapped. In quick conversations, glass-walled meeting rooms lined the hall, each filled with people pointing at screens and scribbling notes. Nina was shown to her desk small, but next to a large window that overlooked the city. She took a moment to sit down, her heart still. Racing, a young man a few desks down leaned back in his chair. He had a confident smile and perfectly styled hair. "You're the new intern, right?" he asked. "Yeah," Nina replied, standing up slightly. "Derek," he said, nodding. "They say it's rare to get in outside the usual recruitment cycle. Must have some pretty strong connections." Nina blinked. "I just applied." Raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. He turned back to his screen, his fingers moving quickly across his keyboard. Nina sat back down, her excitement a little dimmer now. The next few days moved quickly. Nina was assigned small tasks, at first organizing campaign briefs, proofreading emails, updating spreadsheets. She stayed quiet, focused on her work. She watched how people interacted, how ideas were pitched, how meetings flowed. Everyone seemed to know exactly what to say and when. Nina often felt like she was trying to catch up to a moving train. But she kept going, even when doubt whispered in her ear. One morning, the entire department gathered for a strategy meeting. Nina slipped into a seat at the back of the room, notebook in hand. The room fell silent as the glass door opened and a man walked in. He was tall, dressed in a navy shirt with sleeves rolled up. His hair looked like he had run his hand through it a few times. His face was calm, but his presence quieted the room. "Morning, everyone," he said. "Let's keep this short. I know you've all got deadlines breathing down your necks." Breath caught. It was him, the man from the crosswalk, the stroller. The bear, he was Thomas. And now he was standing at the head of the table, running the meeting. Nina stared, stunned. He didn't glance her way, moved through slides, asked questions, gave feedback. When someone stumbled, he didn't scold. Listened, gave gentle direction, encouraged clarity. When Nina hesitantly offered a small idea, something about using real stories in their next campaign, he paused. "That's a solid angle," he said, looking right at her. "Explore that further." Her cheeks flushed. She nodded, scribbling down his comment like it was gold. After the meeting, Nina returned to her desk, thoughts spinning. Did he recognize her? Was he pretending not to know? Or had she imagined? The whole thing? Every day that followed only deepened the mystery? Thomas led with calm authority. He was kind, professional and thoughtful. But he never once mentioned the bear or their first meeting. Nina started to wonder if she should bring it up. But what would she even say? "Hi, remember when I handed you a stuffed animal on a busy street corner?" Felt silly. Weeks passed. Nina pushed herself to do better, to belong. She stayed late, refined her ideas, helped others without being asked. Even when she felt invisible, she kept showing up. Then came the rainy Thursday. She had volunteered to drop off samples at a partner office across town. She had no umbrella, and the downpour caught her mid-walk. By the time she got back, she was drenched, sniffling, and chilled to the bone. She worked the rest of the day in silence, trying not to sneeze too loudly. The next morning, Nina arrived at her desk to find a small brown paper bag. Inside was a thermos of warm ginger tea, a pack of tissues, and a folded note. It read, "Rest when you need to. You matter. T." Nina stared at the note. Her fingers trembled as she held it. No one had ever done something like that for her in a workplace. Was it really him? Had he remembered? The kindness felt quiet but deeply personal, like a small light in a dark corner. Nina tucked the note into her bag and sipped the tea slowly. It warmed her throat and her heart. The days that followed grew lighter. Thomas would sometimes stop by her desk. Not often, but just enough to ask, "You settling in okay? Or how's that campaign idea coming?" He always spoke with calm respect. No rush, no judgment. Nina still didn't know what he remembered or what he meant by tea. But she began to trust that his kindness was real, even if she didn't have all the answers yet, and somehow, that was enough for now. The office was busier than ever. Campaign season had kicked off, and every department at Greenlight Creative was moving faster than usual. Nina sat at her desk, headphones on, reviewing edits for a presentation due that afternoon. Her coffee had gone cold, her shoulders ached from leaning over her keyboard, yet her mind wasn't entirely on the work. Ever since the tea and the note from Thomas, things had shifted, not in an obvious way. He still passed by like any other. Leaders still offered ideas during meetings, still asked questions in that calm voice. But there were moments, brief ones, when Nina caught his eyes lingering just a second longer. Moments when it felt like he saw more than just an intern. Nina had replayed the crosswalk memory countless times. How he had looked that day. Grateful he had been. The boy with the bear. Ali, the pieces fit. But Thomas still hadn't said a word about it, and neither had. She knew his thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind her. "You've got fans in high places." It was Derek. He leaned against the edge of her desk, sipping from a fancy travel mug. Nina looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He smirked. "Come on, you think no one notices how often Thomas stops by your desk? It's the way he asks you about your ideas?" Nina frowned. "He checks in with everyone." "Sure he does," Derek said, raising his eyebrows, "but not like that." He walked away without another word. Nina sat frozen for a moment. A strange knot formed in her stomach. That afternoon, whispers followed her in the break room. Small, clipped phrases she couldn't catch. Glances that quickly looked away when she entered. By the end of the week, Nina was avoiding eye contact. With everyone, she kept her head down during meetings, gave short answers, and left the office as soon as her tasks were done. She even stopped volunteering for extra assignments. It reminded her too much of something from her past. Her mother, Nina, remembered the day her mom came home with tears streaming down her face. Nina had been 11, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. Her mother worked as a clerk in a small office. She had always been proud of her work. But one day her boss started acting different, made her feel small, gave her too much to do, then blamed her for missing things. When she stood up for herself, she was let go. "I did the right thing," her mother kept repeating, her voice shaking. "I did the right thing." Nina never forgot that day. And now here she was, years later, feeling the same shame. Same fear. Was she only here because of a moment of kindness? Did people think she didn't earn her place? Was Thomas helping her because of pity? The next time he stopped by her desk and asked how her project was going, she smiled tightly and said, "Fine, thank you." He paused, clearly sensing something different. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Just tired," she replied. He nodded slowly and walked away later that day. Nina stepped into the break room and saw something that stopped her heart. A little boy in a yellow sweater sitting on a bench, swinging his legs. He held a bear with one button. "Hi, Allie." He looked up, eyes brightening. "You're the lady who found Teddy." Nina crouched beside him, heart pounding. "You remember me?" "Yes," he said, holding up the bear proudly. "He's all fixed now." A soft laugh came from the doorway. Thomas stood there, watching. "He insisted on visiting today," he said, stepping into the room. "I didn't think you'd both run into each other." Nina stood up slowly. "So you did remember." "Of course I did," Thomas said, voice quiet. "How could I forget?" Nina didn't know what to say. The questions she had been avoiding all week rushed to the surface. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked. "I didn't want to make you uncomfortable," Thomas said, "or change the way you saw this job. I wanted you to earn everything on your own." "But you sent the email," she said. "You gave me the chance." "I did," he replied, "because you reminded me of something important, that people still notice the small things, even when the world moves fast." Nina looked down at Ali, who was now making his bear wave at her. "I've been struggling," she admitted. "People are talking. I don't know what they think, but it's been ... hard." "I'm sorry," Thomas said. "You don't deserve that." "I just don't want people to think I'm here for the wrong reasons," Nina whispered. "Then show them," he said gently. "Not through what you say, but through how you keep going.
Oh.
You've already done more than most people do in there." First year, Nina blinked fast, trying not to cry in front of a child. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," he replied. "For that day, for the bear. It reminded me of what matters." As Ali stood up and grabbed his dad's hand, he looked back at Nina. "Teddy says hi," he said cheerfully. Nina laughed softly. "Tell him I said hi back." As they left the break room, Nina sat down slowly, her heart still racing. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a while, she felt seen. Not because of a rumor, not because of pity, because someone had remembered. A small kindness, and that meant more than she could explain. The wind outside brushed gently against the windows of Greenlight. Creative, inside the office buzzed with quiet excitement. Today was the launch of their newest project. Nina stood by the digital display wall, straightening the final campaign slides and checking the visuals. One last time, this campaign wasn't just another product rollout. It was a storytelling initiative, something that mattered. It focused on small acts of kindness. It's a type of moments that don't go viral, but still change lives. And it had started with a bear, Nina remembered. The morning she picked up the button-eyed toy, she never thought it would lead her here. Back then, she had doubted everything about herself, her voice, her worth, her place in a world that moved too fast. Now, she was presenting a project she had helped shape. She wasn't just part of the team, she was a voice behind the message. Thomas stepped into the room just as the meeting began. He wore a calm expression, but Nina could see the pride in his eyes. He nodded at her, a quiet signal of support. She returned the gesture with a small smile. "Thank you all for being here," Nina began, her voice clear and steady. "What we're launching today is more than a campaign. It's a reminder that kindness matters, that even the smallest moments can leave the deepest marks." The room listened, and when the lights dimmed to show the short film she helped write, there were no interruptions, just silence, and then soft applause when it ended. After the meeting, as people filtered out, Thomas approached her. "You did great," he said. "Thank you," Nina replied, "for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." His gaze thoughtful. It wasn't just belief, it was trust. Trust that you would grow, and you did. Nina looked down for a moment, then said softly, "I was afraid for a long time that I didn't belong here. That people only saw me as someone lucky or chosen for the wrong reasons. And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "I see that I chose myself too. A few weeks later, Greenlight Creative hosted a small gathering to celebrate the campaign's early success. There was music, laughter, and warm drinks in paper cups. Nina stood near the window, chatting with a few colleagues who once felt distant, but now greeted her with genuine warmth. Across the room, Ali tugged on his dad's sleeve. He was holding a new drawing. Nina recognized the red crayon hearts from across the room. "Can I give it to her?" Ali asked. Thomas smiled. "Of course." Ali ran over and handed the paper to Nina. "This is you," he said proudly. "That's Teddy. And that's my daddy. And we're all holding hands." Nina blinked quickly. "It's beautiful, Ali."
"Thank you."
He grinned, then raced back to his juice box. Thomas joined her moments later, looking out the window. "He talks about you a lot," he said. "He's a good kid," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" Nina said at last. "Of course. Why didn't you ever tell me you were the CEO that day at the crosswalk?" Thomas smiled gently. "'Cause in that moment I wasn't the CEO. I was just a dad, tired one. And you were someone who noticed. Someone who cared. And honestly, I didn't want to change how you saw me." Nina nodded. "I'm glad I saw you the way I did." He turned to her. "Me too." Months passed. Nina continued to grow in her role. She led small projects, mentored new interns, and slowly found her place not just in the company, but in the city. She no longer felt like a visitor in her own life. One evening, as she walked out of the building with her coat wrapped tightly around her, she saw Thomas waiting near the curb with Ali. The boy was holding something behind his back. "Surprise," Ali said, revealing a small stuffed bear. Not the original, but a new one, handmade. One eye was a button, the other was stitched in fabric. Tiny heart was sewn on its chest. "We made it for you," Thomas said. Ali insisted. Nina knelt down and took the bear gently. "He's perfect." Ali beamed. Thomas stepped closer. "We were wondering," he began, then hesitated. "If you'd like to join us for dinner? Just dinner? No pressure, just dinner." Nina looked at both of them. The man who had thanked her like she had done something great. The child who remembered every smile. The bear that started it all. She nodded. "I'd love that." As they walked together down the sidewalk, Ali between them, chattering about superheroes and pancakes, Nina felt something shift again. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life rarely gives those, but it was something better. Real, earned, gentle. They weren't just strangers passing on a busy street anymore. They weren't just intern and boss, or woman and child. They were people who had chosen each other, one kindness at a time.